Okay, so have you ever scrolled through social media and just felt like everyone else is out there having these amazing experiences while you're stuck at home?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's FOMO, fear of missing out. And today we're going to look at how FOMO can be particularly challenging for autistic adults.
Sounds fascinating.
It is. And to help us understand this better, we're diving into a blog post titled Adult Autism and the Fear of Missing Out, FOMO. It's from a website called Cheap ABA, which has a bunch of resources on autism.
Oh, cheap ABA. Yeah, I've seen that site. They've got some really helpful stuff.
Totally. And this particular blog post, they go beyond just social media and look at some of the underlying reasons why autistic adults might experience FOMO more intensely.
Right, because it's more than just, seeing pictures of parties and vacations.
Uh,
It goes deeper than that.
exactly. So let's break down those deeper reasons, those FOMO intensifiers, so to speak. What are some of the key factors they highlight in the blog post?
Well, the first one that jumps out is social anxiety.
Okay, makes sense.
A lot of autistic individuals experience social anxiety, so even the thought of going to a social event, even if they want to connect with people, can be really daunting.
Oh, absolutely. So even if you're missing out because of the anxiety itself, that just adds another layer to the FOMO. It's like a vicious cycle.
Exactly. And that ties into the second factor they talk about, which is the desire for connection.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it kind of
But
challenges that stereotype that autistic people are antisocial. They often crave connection, just like anyone else. It's just that actually forming and navigating those connections can be a lot harder because of the social challenges that can come with autism.
right, so it's like this push and pull. You want to be included, but the thought of actually being in those social situations triggers anxiety.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. And then when you add in the fear of isolation, which is the third factor, it kind of compounds the whole FOMO experience.
Oh, the fear of isolation.
Yeah. I mean, being left out hurts anyone, but for autistic adults who might already feel different or misunderstood, that sense of isolation can be even more intense.
It's not just missing a party. It's about potentially reinforcing those feelings of not belonging. I think that's something everyone can relate to on some level.
Right. We all want to feel like we belong. And then, of course, there's the issue of sensory
A
overload.
sensory overload, yeah,
Yeah.
big one.
Think about all the things that happen at a typical party, the loud music, the flashing lights, lots of people talking at once.
Ugh, yeah. I can already feel my head spinning.
Right. And for someone with sensory sensitivities, this can be completely overwhelming, which makes it even harder to actually enjoy those social situations.
It's like trying to enjoy a movie while someone's blasting a siren in your ear.
Mm.
Your senses are just on high alert, making it impossible to focus on anything else.
Exactly. And that's where I think this blog post gets really helpful. It doesn't just explain why autistic adults experience FOMO differently. It also offers some practical strategies for managing those feelings, which I think we'll dive into next.
Yeah, definitely. Let's get into those strategies because I think we could all use a little help with managing FOMO in our lives. What kind of things does this blog post recommend?
Well, one of the first things they talk about is, setting boundaries.
Okay, boundaries like what kind?
Particularly with social media. I mean, how much of our FOMO is actually fueled by constantly scrolling through these, perfect curated versions of other people's lives?
Oh, for sure. Social media can be a real FOMO trigger.
Right. So even just taking a short break from social media can make a big difference.
The social media detox, I'm all for it.
Another strategy they suggest is practicing mindfulness.
Mindfulness, okay.
This is all about being present in the moment, focusing on what you are doing rather than what you might be missing.
Yeah. So shifting your focus from I'm missing out to I'm choosing to be here now, and that's okay.
Exactly. You got it. And the blog post also talks about finding and pursuing things that you're genuinely passionate about.
Oh, like hobbies and interests?
Exactly. Having something that brings you joy and excitement, regardless of what everyone else is doing, can be a powerful antidote to FOMO.
It's like having something that's uniquely yours and that you can control.
And then, of course, there's having a good support system, surrounding yourself with people who get you, whether that's friends, family, or even online communities.
Right, that feeling of belonging and understanding, huge.
Absolutely. They also talk about challenging negative thoughts, which might seem simple, but it can be really effective.
So instead of getting caught up in those I'm missing out thoughts, you try to replace them with something more positive.
Yeah, like reminding yourself of something you are grateful for or looking forward to.
I love that. It's like a mental shift. It probably takes practice though, right?
It does. And finally, they emphasize seeking professional help if FOMO is significantly impacting your life. A therapist can give you personalized tools and strategies.
which is so important to remember. Sometimes we need a little extra support, and there's absolutely no shame in reaching out for it.
Completely agree. And what's interesting is that while the blog post focuses on these coping strategies, which are super valuable, it also kind of hints at something bigger.
Oh, I love where this is going. What are you thinking?
Well, it makes you think about how FOMO isn't just, a personal struggle. It's also a reflection of our society in a way. Like, this blog post does a great job of giving us tools to deal with FOMO, but what if we actually, tried to address those root causes? What if we actually tried to create a world where everyone felt more included and accepted, regardless of their differences?
I love that.
Yeah.
So instead of just putting a Band-Aid on the problem, we're trying to prevent the problem in the first place.
Exactly. Think about it. If autistic individuals didn't constantly feel this pressure to conform to these social norms that don't really fit them, if they felt genuinely seen and understood for who they are, wouldn't that naturally reduce some of the anxiety and fear that kind of fuels FOMO in the first place?
Right. It's like instead of always asking artistic individuals to adapt to a world that wasn't really built for them, we're challenging that world to become more inclusive and accommodating.
Exactly. And that brings me to another point that I think this blog post kind of touches on almost indirectly. It's about the language we use. Like, when you think about those four factors we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
the social anxiety, the desire for connection, the fear of isolation, the sensory overload, those are all based on real experiences, right?
Right.
But sometimes the way we talk about FOMO makes it seem trivial or shallow.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's often portrayed as this silly thing that teenagers worry about, like missing the latest viral trend or a party.
Right. But as we've been discussing, for autistic adults, it can be much deeper and more complex than that.
So it's not just about dismissing it as, oh, it's just FOMO. It's about recognizing and validating those feelings, which actually, you know what, that ties back perfectly to what you were saying earlier about creating a more inclusive world. If we can shift our understanding of FOMO, then we can start to address some of those larger systemic issues that contribute to it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And there's one more thing from this blog post that I wanted to highlight. It might seem like a small detail, but I think it's actually really significant. And that's their emphasis on finding what works for you.
Oh, yeah. When we were going through those strategies earlier, it'd be easy to feel kind of overwhelmed, like you have to do all the things.
Mm.
But the blog post really makes it clear that it's about experimenting, adapting, and personalizing those strategies.
And that's such a crucial message, especially for autistic individuals who are often told to fit into this, very specific mold. What this blog post is doing, I think, is subtly encouraging them to embrace their individuality and find what truly helps them manage FOMO.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach. It's about finding your own way, and that's really empowering.
Absolutely. It's about, taking control of your experience and finding strategies that resonate with you, your needs, your neurodiversity.
Wow. This has been such an interesting conversation. We started with, like, the nuances of FOMO for autistic adults, and now we're talking about societal norms and individual empowerment.
I know, right? It's amazing how these deep dives can take us to these unexpected places.
It really is. But before we get too carried away, maybe we should do a quick recap just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, sounds good. What do you want to start with?
Okay, so let's rewind for a second, go over those main points one more time. We started by, exploring how FOMO, that feeling of missing out, can be especially tough for autistic adults. Yeah. And we saw that it goes, way deeper than just envy on social media, although that definitely doesn't help.
Right, exactly. We talked about those four factors, remember, from that cheap ABA blog post. Social anxiety, the desire for connection, fear of isolation, and sensory overload. And, well, all of those can make it even tougher for autistic adults to, handle social situations and deal with the idea of, well, missing out.
Yeah. And of course, we couldn't forget those practical strategies from the blog post. Setting boundaries with social media, practicing mindfulness, finding your passions, building a supportive community, all great ways to, manage FOMO. And it's important to remember, if you're struggling, don't be afraid to talk to a therapist.
Absolutely. But I think what was really interesting is how we went beyond just coping mechanisms. We started thinking about the bigger picture. What if we actually tried to create a world where everyone felt more included? Instead of asking autistic people to adapt to a world that wasn't really made for them.
It's such a powerful idea, shifting from individual burden to collective responsibility.
Yeah,
And I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive.
I agree. It gives us a lot to think about, How can we all contribute to a world where FOMO is more about choice and less about fear?
That's the question, isn't it? So thanks for joining us today on the deep dive into FOMO. Keep learning, keep exploring, and we'll catch you on the next one.